Hi there. This is my big compilation video report on all of the spy photos that we got for the Battle of Rook's Rest in House of the Dragon Season 2. Battle of Rook's Rest is the main large-scale action set piece of the entire season, and we've known for months that it's happening in Episode 4. And we got a lot of really good quality spy photos of this. This guy, Unbox PhD, he must have been out there in a camouflage suit, got right up to people. And I have about 50 images to share in this. The issue is, why haven't I reported on this before? They wrapped a month ago after a full 2 weeks of filming. Well, other spoilers came out in the past month for the White Walker stuff, for Cregan, but for me, it wasn't really that pressing of a concern. I kept pushing it off because I was backlogged in the first place. We didn't learn that much from these spy photos. I mean, they're really good of stuntmen fighting each other, and they have very clear heraldry. We know what the sides are. But I felt a wave of relief when WinterIsComing.net's podcast, their head editors there, said, in as many words, "These are amazing spy photos, but there really isn't much to say about them, because they're sticking pretty close to the story of the books." That, from my perspective as a book fan watching the show, we know what happens in the Battle of Rook's Rest. So what more can we say? That had they deviated from the book story, if there was this clear invention in it, or a character who wasn't there in the book was there, I would have rushed online to talk about it. But in contrast, it was very faithful. For the book fans out there, the message is, this seemed pretty like they're handling it pretty faithfully, which is great. So that's why I wasn't rushing to report on it in dribs and drabs every couple of days when a new set of spy photos or spy videos was coming out. It didn't really... There were other bigger changes that I felt I needed to report on and go, I'm pretty much okay with this is a minor change, that kind of thing. So don't take my word for it, even WinterIsComing.net said this. Of course, the clickbait channels and hype reporters, every time a spy photo came out, even when it was just like two stuntmen fighting who were, foot soldiers, would then start rambling off. And this is, of course, this character dies in this battle, or that character gets hurt, and this ties into that assassination, listing off, you've seen these, what they do. It's like they just picked keywords as catchphrases of blood and cheese, battle of the gullet, things like that. I know how these characters die. It's as if in Game of Thrones Season 1, if you saw a photo of a prop dummy of a beheaded Ned Stark, yeah, I know that's from the book, but the clickbaiters would be having a field day with that, endlessly going over it, and there's nothing to say. That's a moment from the book. I know what it is. And they didn't change anything. So I'm just going to let run in the background here the 50 still images we have. There were videos. I'm not going to run those for copyright reasons. But they were pretty extensive. Just the battle that they're having. It's at the edge of a forest. They come out into the field where they start fighting. They mass at the tree line that advance on the castle. The castle, which is off screen. And the other issue is, we already knew this was happening in Episode 4, like I said, because months ago back in May, that's the scale of this, we saw the aftermath of the Battle of Rook's Rest, when they're coming back from the battle into King's Landing, Caceres, and very clearly the spy said, this is Episode 5, the aftermath of Rook's Rest. So you went, well, that confirms that we knew since May that Episode 4 out of an 8-episode season is the Battle of Rook's Rest. So this wasn't surprising us or anything. The one issue was it took us a while to narrow down who was directing it. And as it turned out, it came down to Alan Taylor or Geeta Patel. That one of them was doing the finale, Episode 8, and one of them was doing the big action scene, Episode 4. And to our surprise, Alan Taylor is handling this battle. Which makes sense, he's handled other battle stuff on Game of Thrones itself. Geeta Patel is not particularly known for handling large-scale action sequences, which doesn't disprove anything like Battle of the Gullet, naval battle CGI or purely dragon CGI stuff. This is a point against that there's another big battle happening in the final episode. I think they're ending on a cliffhanger, but it doesn't actually happen yet, because Patel doesn't usually do that kind of thing. Or at least, there isn't going to be a second battle on this scale involving this many stuntmen, that even if they were doing like a naval battle, you'd have, like they did in Game of Thrones Season 7, we would have noticed the amount of stuntmen that they were pouring into this, and makeup teams handling injuries and stuff. They're not doing something on that scale again later in the season. And really, they're not beholden to that pattern. I mean, people used to go, oh, it's a tradition that Game of Thrones is on the nines, that episode 9 out of 10 is always a big action thing, like Battle of the Blackwater was episode 9 in season 2, Battle of the Wall was episode 9 in season 4, but that's because these are based on novels where there's a climax and then a few chapters of aftermath and leading up to the next book. Fire and Blood is based on a book. It's an outline in the form of an in-universe history book, and there are chapters in it. I mean, obviously there's climaxes to chapters in it, but it's not nearly the same thing. It was weird when season 1 was going on. So many people were going, well, here's the director list. They sure must be doing a big action thing in episode 9, and they didn't. That we already knew the outline of. From leaks, we had a story outline months before it aired, but people were surprised when there's a giant battle with many dozens of stuntmen in episode 3, that they weren't beholden to that format. They shouldn't, force everything into the same format, round peg, square hole, everything like that. Obviously, episode 9 had twists and turns, there was a coup, and episode 10 had a big dragon versus dragon fight. It was just pure CGI, but when I say the set-piece battle, it involves a lot of people. I mean, stuntmen, you can only really do one of those a season in terms of the big one. And there can be other little fights, but the big action set-piece will be episode 4. In many ways, season 2 will kind of have two halves, much as season 1 very obviously did, where they switched the lead actors. Even in the behind-the-scenes videos, they openly call it season 1A and season 1B. That Rook's Rest is basically a mid-season cliffhanger at episode 4, because it's a huge battle. It's the next big dragon versus dragon fight, because they don't just throw their dragons away fighting, that it's like chess, where you don't want to, your queen is powerful, but when you use it, you expose it. They explain this in the book pretty well, that we only want to gang up on other dragons, like 2-1, 3-1 if we can, rather than just sending them out in waves and we'd be the ones riding them. There's only 6 dragon versus dragon fights in the entire war, and they're always a slugfest, then a major set piece. And there are other battles involving dragons where they're fighting people or fighting ships, but it's just, well, you attack where the enemy is weak. Attack where they don't have another dragon. Think of it like in naval warfare. If you have a battleship and you go against one other battleship, you're fighting with even odds. You want 2 battleships versus 1 battleship, or even better, you want to be, of the 2 fleets, you want to be the only one that has a single battleship versus another one with just frigates and stuff. So it's a force multiplier thing. I hope they explain this on screen of why do they rarely face each other head on like that. Because it's dangerous. And it's risking your assets when you deploy them like that. It's a roll of the dice. So it is the first big battle, the opening phase of the war. There's other battles in the Riverlands. It's a pretty big battle. It's what you think the Dance of the Dragons should be. 2 opposing armies, each with dragons fighting each other. As opposed to, like, Vagar versus Arax was a duel between dragons and have armies in it. So this is pretty much spoiler-free. We found out that Alan Taylor is directing it. We have seen photos of him on set now. There aren't really spoilers or anything that I can give, so I'm just running all of these images as I ramble over them. I admit it, I didn't have much to say about it. I made this video for the purpose of, I'm not going to clickbait you, I'm just sharing all this nice imagery. The one story thing I will give is the lead up to the battle. I'm sorry this wasn't I didn't really script this that much. It's not a big showcase video for me. How is the return of the White Walkers a good idea, and what lore things could they give, was more meaningful to me, and I put more thought into than this, because it's just images of stuntmen fighting each other. And I know what happens in the Battle of Rook's Rest, but for all you new people, I said this is spoiler free. I'm not going to say who lives, dies, whatever. Why are they fighting here? After an assassination attempt by Rhaenyra's faction on Alicent's faction, this is the one tiny spoilery thing. The Greens get really upset and decide, Aegon in particular, he's really upset, and he goes, we need to attack Rhaenyra's supporters, and we need to attack them now. And this is the one spoilery thing, because it is in the images, that his grandfather Otto keeps saying, it's not that big of a spoiler, things change like this. Otto keeps saying, wait to gather our armies. Wait to gather our armies. We have a numbers advantage. Wait for the Triarchy to ally with us. We need to gather all of our armies from the south, from Old Town, from the Stormlands, from the Lannisters. But what Rhaenyra's faction does is so upsetting that Aegon goes, I am not your puppet, old man. You're fired. Criston Cole is the new hand of the king. And I really hope there's this moment where, on a meta level, they imitate when Tywin talked down Joffrey and just said the king is tired. Take him away. Spur moment just occurred to me. I hope they have Otto do that, and then have Aegon walk up to him, rip off his chain of office, the necklace that has all the interlocking hands, and hand it to Criston, go to Criston. Criston, you are the new hand of the king. Escort my grandfather to his chambers. He is tired. And he does it. Imagine how cool that would be if just... he isn't Joffrey. He isn't this feckless idiot. Because Joffrey was not only a moron, he wasn't the real king. That he was a fraud. The only thing propping him up was Tywin's support. Versus, Aegon is more than Joffrey. He is the son of the king. He is a dragon rider. That is something. And you're just my grandfather, and you're acting like you can order me around like I'm a kid. More so than Tywin was able to... Tywin could really boss around Joffrey. There's going to be... This is a big quote Ryan Condal gave about this is the season where the kids in season 1 are growing into their own. He doesn't need to listen to Otto. Maybe he should have, because he kept going, patience, patience. But I like when there's two sides to everything. Another thing they are playing up is that they did say the Valyrian fleet blockading King's Landing will lead to problems. In the book, it just mentions the merchants are upset with him. We know from other spy photos that Episode 3 will have outright food riots, which is an invention, but a great idea, just to show the Valyrian naval blockade is causing real problems for them. And this is what all this is leading to. That they're running out of food because the two main food exporting regions of Westeros are the Riverlands and the Reach. Rhaenyra's side pretty quickly consolidates the Riverlands. In like the first episode or two, they'll have consolidated the Riverlands. And while the Greens control the southern Reach, the northern half of the Reach turns out to be loyal to Rhaenyra. Remember when they killed Lord Caswell? The Caswells rule over Bitterbridge in the northern half of the Reach, so they side against them. So the only food exporting surplus region that's loyal to the Greens is the southern Reach, which does make a ton of food even on its own, but we're blocked by the northern half of the Reach. So looking at a map here, just where would they get food if not through sea trade? That's what the Crown Lands are for. Now the other thing is, Game of Thrones never mentioned the name the Crown Lands in dialogue, which was annoying that they never set that up, that it's more than just King's Landing. That King's Landing and Dragonstone, there's a couple of other vassals around them, that when Aegon the Conqueror forged the Iron Throne, he carved out basically a ninth kingdom from bits of the neighboring ones, bits of the Riverlands, bits of the Stormlands, and they're the royal fief. These are the houses sworn directly to the Iron Throne. And they're the ones that are more than sea trade or exporting regions really meant to directly supply it with like food and stuff. So this was a plot point in Game of Thrones, in the War of the Five Kings, in the books, when, well, the Riverlands swore to rob Stark, the Lannisters seized the southern ones, but they're burning out the crops, before the Tyrells and the Reach join the Lannisters, when they're siding with Renly. No food is coming in, and Stannis has blockaded them. Similar situation there. And Tyrion, in his chapters, is saying he has to visit and be nice to the Stokeworths and entertain Tonda Stokeworth, and maybe I'll find a match for your daughter or something. Because in his head, he notes, the Stokeworths are supplying half of our food supply, and we're starving now. We're at low rations. But at least we're getting something. And half of what we're even getting is coming from House Stokeworth. So point is, Aegon is angry and wants to attack Rhaenyra's supporters immediately, and because of the naval blockade, they can't hit any who are on islands, like Dragonstone itself, or even Driftmark, which is relatively nearby. So they go, okay, the nearest ones are the Crown Lands houses on the mainland. But my hope is that, and I think they're going to do this, that the TV show will add actual strategy by having Aegon point out, we kind of need to secure those mainland Crownlanders like the Stokeworths to get their food supply. That we are cut off here. Naval blockade, Riverlands, Northern Reach. There's a good 6-month chunk in the books where I do not know how they were getting food, unless by implication that because they secured Stokeworth. I want them to spell that out, but this is all just speculation. I know I'm nerding out over this, just to explain why armies do things. More than just, I'm angry. But geographically, the main Crown Lands houses on the mainland that are big food suppliers, west to east from King's Landing. First one you hit is Rosby. They actually call it the Rosby Road, is the east road going out of King's Landing. And the next thing, like a day's ride, is Rosby. And after Rosby, you get to Stokeworth, and after Stokeworth is the major port of Duskendale. Now, Rosby and Stokeworth, the houses that rule them, have the same name. It's House Rosby, House Stokeworth. House Rosby's sigil is 3 red chevrons. House Stokeworth's sigil is a white lamb with a golden cup on a green field. We actually saw that briefly in Game of Thrones. Duskendale in this time period, though, is ruled by House Darklyn. They die out like 50 years before Game of Thrones, but they are around in this time period. You actually saw Darklyn heraldry in the first episode at the tournament in King's Landing. So you've already seen that with the diamonds on yellow and everything. So they're in the Crown Lands. They're in a straight line like that. After Duskendale, east of that, is Rook's Rest. It's the last major vassal on the coast like that, ruled by House Staunton, and their sigil is white wings on black with a checkerboard thing. East of that is Cracklaw Point. That's Pine Barrens, doesn't produce food. It's just piney scrub forest. You don't need to worry about that. Minor houses. It's a straight line. It's Rosby, Stokeworth, Duskendale, then Rook's Rest. And because we saw this out of order again, episode 5, we saw these vassal banners with them that when someone bends the knee to you, they're forced to join your army. So in the book, without fighting, the Rosbys and Stokeworth submitted rather than be destroyed. The Darklands pulled up for a fight, but they had dragons, they had an army, so the first real fighting of this campaign is the sack of Duskendale, which we know from leaks is like, I think it might even be off-screen, but we see the aftermath of it at the beginning of episode 4, that they are sacking Duskendale. I saw that Cole gives a speech about bend the knee and live, and against the whore Rhaenyra or die, and then he beheads Lord Darklyn. And a Red Team review asked about that, if they didn't build him up as the Kingmaker enough. They will in Season 2. That from the casting things I saw for Lord Darklyn, there's a point where he's dragged in front of Cole to be beheaded, and Cole beheads him, but before he does, he spits, Lord Darkland spits, "You've soiled your white cloak, Kingmaker," and then he cuts his head off. So they are working that in. But then they're discussing where do we go next, and Cole goes, "We're going east to Rook's Rest." That they're grinding down the Crownlanders. And there's other houses in the Crownlands north of that, like the Hayes and everything. They're not as prominent as the ones that are along the coast that are right there, directly feeding King's Landing. I wish they'd build them up a little more, like the Butterwells and everything. But that aside, this is why they are attacking Rook's Rest. They are consolidating the Crownlands. The houses closest to them, who are in striking distance, who are loyal to Rhaenyra, who I like to think they're going to mention, "By the way, they cut off our jugular, we're blockaded, we need their food supplies." That's why they're doing this. And I know I've been explaining this for over 10 minutes, but that's why you see the heraldry you're seeing now in all of these spy photos. I said the whole point of this video is just me rambling over spy photos that are kind of repetitive after a while. There's high towers, you see the 3 red chevrons for the Rosbys, you see the Stokeworth lamb, you even see Duskendale heraldry from the House Darkland because they bent the knee to them. So that they pressed gang them into their service, and they're using them up on the attack. One other thing I didn't want to mention before, but I will now because Redanian Intelligence has finally mentioned this publicly. The leak stuff we got for, like, casting sheets and just, we need this many guys in this, like, have half a dozen Rosby guards in this scene, have half a dozen Darklands in this scene. The way they refer to Aegon II's new sigil, that it's a little modified from the books. In the books, it's a golden dragon on a black field. But to emphasize that he's allied with the High Towers, they modified it so it's a gold dragon on a green field, which is great. In season 1, I was worried they were going to make it a green dragon, and maybe they will at first, but then when he tells Otto to piss off, he might change it to the gold dragon. I think this is it's more visually distinct, and it's still pretty much, it's a gold dragon, just on green instead of on black. And it helps it stand out more. The way the casting sheets and scripts describe the guards in that costume, like have a half a dozen Darklands here, they call them the Highgardians. Highgarden Targaryens elided to just Highgardians. The Highgardian sigil is the Aegon II sigil, which I think is nice, as opposed, because it needs to fit within a certain column on the sheet, you know. They can't write out Aegon II sigil-bearing soldiers. It'd be too long, so they called the Highgardian design. I don't know what they called the Rhaenyra stuff. We simply didn't see leaks about that. If we knew, I would have told you. So that we're seeing all this stuff of these men fighting. I'm just throwing more and more scenes at this. And now let me go down my list of this is why you were seeing guys in these costumes doing this. Alan Taylor's directing it. It's in episode 4. We knew that. Other stuff we saw with the characters. We've seen shots of Fabian Frankel on set. And I told you the one spoiler thing from the photos is he's wearing the Hand of the King necklace now. You can see that in the spy photos. That's why I explained it. Minor thing, like Otto's still around at court, and that might change up. We don't know. But he's there. Some of these shots are of his stunt double, and that's why sometimes he has those dots on his face. That's to digitally double it up in wide shots. But some of these are stunt doubles, but Fabian was there in other shots. Ewan Mitchell was there as Aemond, and minor change, Gwaine Hightower was there too. Freddie Fox. He was in season 1 to play by just a stuntman, but Gwaine is Alicent's brother. So this is Aemon's maternal uncle. But they made him the head of the City Watch, the second command of the City Watch, but fine, it's an army from King's Landing. Gwaine was in King's Landing. They do this, then return to King's Landing. Might as well have him go along with his nephew Aemond. That's not even a change to me, it's just keep the character involved in the scene. Like I said, we don't know if Eddie Iyer is playing Hightower or not. And I threw this together last minute. I'm not prioritizing, oh my god, it's a giant battle. Little story things like Rhaena going to the Vale mean more to me than, like, I know what this is, and it was pretty faithful to the books, and they didn't change anything. One thing I will say is that the scale was pretty impressive, and I'm annoyed that Game of Thrones would try to hide the story problems by just badgering us, burying us with facts and figures. Remember, they were list off in articles figures and numbers of, like, this is how much gravel we use, this is how many stuntmen there are, and like the Winterfell battle had 300 stuntmen in season 8, and it's, even if it wasn't too dark to see anything, this battle made no sense. Like, you have you put your catapults ahead of your infantry. Why is anyone outside of the castle walls? And they were going for scale as opposed to story. So, you know me, you all know me here, that people were just freaking out so much in Battle of the Bastards about they used 70 horses in this shot that the story in Battle of the Bastards makes no sense. And they're just imitating shots from certain other movies and things, like Aragorn charging at the Black Gate. This is a terrible battle. Battle of the Bastards isn't a triumph of cinema. It's the point I turned on the show. I was gaping at the screen going, the North didn't remember. The northern vassals don't turn on the Boltons. The entire moral that if you constantly betray people, as soon as you're weak, they will turn on you. Whereas the Starks treat everyone well, so even on their knees, people are willing to support them. That was, even in the episode, it's like, did they cut together just what they had from the dailies? They even hyped up, Ramsay's men serve him out of fear. When he's losing, they'll turn on him. And then that didn't happen. I think they just edited together what they had. But so many people, oh, there's this epic shot. I really hope the better battles we'll get in House of the Dragon make the memory of that thing fade. It's got like a fandom unto itself, and people just were willing to forget all of the story problems, or even just, not for characters, I mean, within the episode, things didn't make sense. And how are these people getting through? No one has scouts. Sansa doesn't actually do anything, but they act like she did. Lots of problems in that, but the bigger thing is when you saw an interview Sapochnik gave where he said the original version they wanted to do was unfilmable. They wanted just 20 minutes of Jon in a man pile with no tactics, just like him fighting in the mud amongst a pile of people. They wanted to do horses with it, which is like, that would kill a horse and maybe kill a stuntman. It's the people attributed everything to Benioff and Weiss. They took credit for Sapochnik rewriting the episode from scratch, the battle from scratch, because their version was god-awful. They wanted to do basically what they did in Season 8, where it's just people hacking at zombies endlessly and it gets boring. And he had to rewrite that, like, any good moments from that are from Sapochnik, not them. I'm rambling here and I know it, but point is, when we say, oh, there's these 70 horses in a charge going for Kit Harington, we have spy videos showing, I counted, 24 fully armored heavy horse from House Hightower in a single shot. Heavy horse from House Hightower. Point is, and they're charging, but they're not like tripping over infantry and stuntmen. They made it a point to make a path for them. But that was one of the things that had me nodding and impressed about this. I'm just showing you the still image here, that they're going to double this up so it's like 100 people, of course, but they always double everything up digitally. But there were at least 24 heavy horse in a single shot in this battle. This is going to have heavy cavalry in it, which is it's not just the dragons. It's going to be very impressive. Other stuff we saw, well, there might be a point where the dragon scares some of the Hightower army. Some men from the Hightower army start retreating, and I think Kristen starts killing some men to try to keep them from deserting. You know that if you don't serve in combat, you serve on the firing line. That's just how this works. Get back there, you traitors. So they're throwing men at them. That eventually the Green's dragons show up on the battlefield to counter the Black's dragons. And this isn't in the book, but it could have been. There's this point where Cole re-rallies his army, giving a rousing speech that our dragons have arrived. Rally, rally, we have our dragons here now. We were luring them in, making them think we didn't have dragons. And someone caught all of this on video. We hear his voice booming over the battlefield. We didn't see him personally, but he shouts, quote, and I'm not even going to try to do his voice, "Men at arms, your king has joined you. Hold to your courage, hold to your wits, for the seven have blessed and shielded this host with divine purpose. For the one true king, Aegon, advance." So the Green's dragons show up, they rally, and they try to attack again. There were other scenes of... They set up trees that were snapped in half that it clearly looks like dragons crashed through this as they were fighting each other. I'll leave it at that because I don't want to give spoilers. There were a lot of what I hope are dummies of people who were charred bodies. I'm joking, but that was a thing that another reason I'm angry at Battle of the Bastards is they would leave stuntmen out playing corpses at night because they didn't realize, oh wait, we need to bring them back in because it's freezing. And they just leave people out there for a long... It was very irresponsible. But by like season 8 at least, they explained this, the prosthetic team, they'd make these prefab corpse piles where instead of just one corpse dummy, it's a slab that has like 5 bodies on it. But you cover it with dirt and mud so you can't tell it's all connected. But it's a prefab of multiple corpses for when you're set dressing a battlefield like that. And they said it was more efficient than, 2 seasons ago, we just have lots of stuntmen freezing in the mud for a long period of time. So I hope that these dummies of heavy prosthetics... If this is a guy, you've got... Actually, they had 1 or 2 people who were in heavy burn prosthetics, who we then see walking around going to, well, I'm parked by the commissary. So there were some people in burn makeup. There were also, like, bodies burned to ash like Pompeii, which were set dressing for the battlefield, because there's dragons on both sides, there's trebuchets on catapults shooting fire on both sides. So we saw burned bodies, we saw corpses, we saw fighting, a lot of this, but this is all pretty much in keeping with the book. Even Cole, rallying his men with a speech, I mean, it's not line for line in it, but this doesn't contradict anything. So this is great stuff, and I'm really... I know this is me rambling, I'm not giving a good speech. The point of this video is for you to look at the pictures. And in case you can't tell, I'm running behind because filming wrapped yesterday, and I'm trying to get everything done by Sunday, including the season recap, and I left Battle of Rook's Rest stuff at the end for a reason. I don't think these spy photos are that important. They weren't some jaw-dropping revelation. I know what a battle looks like, and I'm impressed that, wow, you got 24 heavy horse for this. You really went all out, and it's not just... even at Battle of the Bastards, the vassal houses didn't really matter. It was almost like a duel between... It's as if Ramsay's army was an extension of himself in a duel with Jon. And here's a thought, because it really was just awards bait for Kit Harington, and I sympathize with Kit. He didn't want to do that. What did other characters do in that battle? Just off the top of your head, everyone goes, well, there's this great shot of Kit in front of a horse charge, or there's Kit in the man pile. What did, Davos do, or Tormund? Off the top of your head, do you see people saying, wow, Tormund bit that guy's throat out in a man pile? It's when this show started, we complained, oh, they're going to do this on a no budget and reduce battles to duels. They did reduce battles to duels because they made them just about the lead characters, to the point, because they're the people who can win awards. And the tier system that they established and all that, this is Emmy baiting, turned them, the battles became duels as opposed to, there is strategy in this. Even season 1 to an extent, I mean, obviously the battle is about Daemon, but there are tactics in the Stepstones battle that you see. He's a lure. He's meant to lure them in so they don't notice the Velaryon fleet landing behind him, or see Smoke the Dragon coming from above. But then they intercut it with shots of Laenor, shots of Corlys, that there was purpose to this, but obviously Daemon is the main character, but there was things going on that weren't just him. Or Laenor taking out the arrow, the archery from the cliffs. Rook's Rest, though, is when they'll really get their chance to shine, to show It's not just the main characters fighting each other, because the main characters are mostly on Dragonback anyway. That how do we show the pieces moving on the game board in a way that is engaging? That you see the moves and counter moves. Look at like Queen's Gambit, that Netflix movie. There is a way to film a chess game exciting, where each time you see someone making a move and counter move, and thinking of what they're going to do next. There's like what the big battle episodes that Neil Marshall did without Benioff and Weiss. Battle of the Blackwater and Battle of the Wall, where there's moves and counter moves between each side and strategies to them, and what are they going to do next. I think like 2 weeks ago, I don't think it was Entertainment Weekly, but some other big news outlet, I remember Red Team Review and Preston Jacobs remarking on this, named the best episode of Game of Thrones was actually Blackwater, not Battle of the Bastards. And they said it had more planning in it. The story made more sense. George R. R. Martin wrote it. So I'm hoping we get a return to that. Just imagine if we had the spectacle, the budget of what they did later in the show, with the planning accurate to the books that was in the early show before they went off book. That this is going to be, it seems very faithful to what Fire and Blood did, but with the budget, like remember season 1, Rob's Battle of Whispering Wood happened off screen. Here, we get 24 heavy horse. And they're going to double that up to make even more men. And intensive fighting. There were like hundreds of extras in this. I don't have an exact number, but it isn't just an extension of Kristen Cole, hundreds of guys wearing Hightower uniforms as if they're this shapeless mass. That, no, like in the Battle of the Bastards, you never even see what happens to the Karstark guy. We never find, he died, but they don't even show it. It doesn't matter. Not in a good way. It doesn't matter. It's about him. It's about John Ramsay. In this battle, the fact that each side has people from multiple houses in it matters. That the Green's army is Hightowers plus Crown Lands houses who bent the knee to them visibly. There's 4 or 5 different uniforms on their side. Matters. It makes the world feel bigger. Well, I'm already 35 minutes into this. I'm lucky I didn't go a full hour. If I had the time to script this and make something more succinct, I would have. I'm not really concerned. They're nice spy photos. You've probably seen them already. And I'm more concerned with getting this out of the way so I can head on to the filming just wrapped. Here's the season overview video. I'm rambling this off just to get to that really quickly. If I had a choice, I don't regret that I put more time on the White Walker stuff, or, wow, Rhaena's going to get stuff to do, or, here's who we think might be Sarah Snow. Because, guys, you've seen spy photos. Anyone could report on this. It didn't require analysis. A few other passing notes, though, just really quickly. In case you've been following my channel, they did film a lot of other things in Bourne in Surrey that were unrelated to this, which some people confused as part of the same battle until it became obvious it wasn't. Like, we saw a dozen Night's Watch mounted rangers riding around, and they used a snowblower to make a snowy forest at night. We could tell, okay, this clearly isn't Battle of Rook's Rest, this is the Wall. I saw 1 or 2 channels mistaking that there were Lannister soldiers in this battle. They were not. We never saw a shot of a Lannister soldier at the Battle of Rook's Rest. I wouldn't rule out maybe 1 or 2, like Martin Rain might be there as representative or something, but not, I haven't even seen a shot of them, so I don't think so. There were Lannister soldiers in Bourne Wood, because nearby they were also filming the Lannister army passing through the Golden Tooth into the Riverlands. It's on the other side of the continent. I don't think they changed that the Lannisters are there or anything. Other stuff, or... Another thing is we actually saw the Rhaena actor in Bourne Wood, but with the cinematographer of Geeta Patel. You know, Catherine Goldschmidt, they were with Catherine Goldschmidt for either episode 3 or episode 8. It might be some scene in the Vale that just requires a woods. But it clearly isn't Rook's Rest. I mean, maybe Rhaena... No, Rhaena wouldn't come to the Aftermath, because the Aftermath would be episode 5. But with the cinematographer for episode 8, that's too much. That makes no sense. It was an unrelated scene. I'm thinking of the Game of Thrones used the grounds of Castle Ward in County Antrim. Like, they'd film the Lannister camp and the Stark camp on the same field. But they'd redress them. The extras would come back dressed in different uniforms. That they only had one big field that they'd used and just redress, it doesn't mean that they're all intermixed at the same time. So that they used that for a couple of things. Don't assume that was all mixed up. That's really all we've heard of this. I'm really looking forward to it, don't get me wrong. That this will put to shame the nonsense of later Game of Thrones seasons. Imagine if we have storytelling married to spectacle in a way we haven't seen since the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Think about that. That the tactics and movements of back and forth, the back and forth of like the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, where now they're bringing up their reserves, we'll bring up our reserves, they'll bring up their Oliphants, moves and counter moves. So I hope you've enjoyed this rant. My words were meaningless in this. The point was to show you off to these 50 spy photos. I've been putting this off for a month because there wasn't really a through line. There weren't major revelations for it. I think this is going to be the major action set piece of the season. I don't think we're getting one later in Season 2. I don't want them to do the Battle of the Gullet, or the Battle of the Lakeshore, for that matter, the Riverlands campaign. The biggest land battle of the war, which hasn't even come yet. It doesn't have dragons in it, but the biggest land battle of the war is the battle by the Lakeshore. It's the culmination of the Riverlands campaign. I want them to take their time to get this right. Remember when we said, oh no, there's only 8 episodes. Let's hope they don't rush it. And then people are complaining, why isn't that battle this season? Well, we're going at a slower pace. It's next season. How can they do that? Because they used to say 3 to 4 seasons. They are now, the head of HBO Drama has openly said, we are now discussing whether to have 5 seasons. And given a choice between 3 more seasons of 10 episodes or 4 more seasons of 8 episodes each, I'd rather go with 4 seasons of 8 episodes each to space out the act breaks more. That's like 32 episodes compared to 30. But just spacing the breaks more, otherwise they'd have to put filler in. It's weird how, like, in 2011 people didn't know the name Battle of the Blackwater, and then it became a household name as, wow, this really well done on-screen battle. This time next year, household name, the Battle of Rook's Rest. And I hope that gets people to stop talking about the damn Battle of the Bastards and all the problems in it. I don't think that even happens in the books. So, we'll see what happens. These were great spy photos. And please stick around for my season overview and what have we learned, an episode by episode outline of everything.